Hey guys, welcome back to the Pulling Curls podcast. Today we are talking about birth plans with an OB GYN, so let's untangle it. Hi, I'm Hilary, a serial overcomplicator. I'm also a nurse, mom to three, and the curly head behind Pulling Curls and the Pregnancy Nurse. This podcast aims to help us stop overcomplicating things and remember how much easier it is to keep things simple. Let's smooth out those snarls with Pregnancy and Parenting Untangled, the Pulling Curls podcast. Today's episode of the Pulling Curls podcast is sponsored by the online prenatal class for couples. If you are looking to get prepared for your birth, it is truly the easy way to do it, so come join me. Today's guest has been an OB/GYN for over 20 years in the Virginia area. She is a proud HBCU grad and is a practicing OB/GYN who has delivered over 1,000 babies. She is also the host of the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. I want to introduce today's guest, Dr. Nicole Rankins. Hey, Nicole, welcome to the Pulling Curls podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, a real doctor, guys.
Yes, I am indeed a real doctor. I've been in practice for 20 years.
And now you are online. And I've seen you before. They emailed me wanting to, and I was like, oh, I think I've seen her on one of the social medias. So it's exciting for you to be here. Where do you practice at?
I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay. All right. And are you accepting patients?
I'm not, but that's because I only practice in the hospital. I work as an OB hospitalist. So as an OB hospitalist, I'm only in the hospital on labor and delivery. I take care of anyone who comes in during my shift. So I can't accept patients even if I wanted to. But if you happen to come while I'm working, then that's lovely.
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand how a hospitalist works. It's just kind of like a doctor that's just there all the time. So I'm glad we're discussing it. And there more and more hospitals are having them. There were like none when I started.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more common in OB/GYN for a number of reasons. One, it increases, and I'm sort of like going off topic here, but it increases safety because there's a doctor in the hospital 24/7. It also decreases the C-section rate because there's not this pressure that, doctors, the 5 o'clock C-section kind of thing decreases C-section rate, which will subsequently increases the chances of vaginal birth. And then for the doctors, it helps them have a more predictable lifestyle where they can be in the office, and when they're home, they're home. And for us, I do my shifts and then I'm off. So it works well for everyone. Patients, doctors, all of us.
Yes, I 100% agree as somebody who's on the other side of hospitalists. Yeah.
Yeah.
But today we are here to talk about birth plans, which is interesting because you haven't seen people in the office. So a lot of times people say their birth plan got derailed at the hospital because they ended up seeing a new doctor. So tell us what you think about birth plans?
Yeah, so birth plans are really an important part of helping you have the birth experience that you want, but they need to be done in a way that actually supports that. So one is that we actually should not use the word plan. I know we use the word plan very commonly, but birth can't be planned. You can't plan birth. Your doctor cannot plan birth. The person who has the most control of the birth process is the baby. They don't tell us their plans. So you can't really plan birth, but of course you should have wishes and preferences for how your birth should go. So instead of thinking of it as a plan, think of it as the things that are important to you that you want for your birth experience. And then along with that is you want to know well before you get to the hospital whether or not the doctor and the hospital actually support what's in that plan. So if you're just pulling up a Google template or a form, printing that out, you fill it out, you're like, great, I filled out my birth plan, and you bring that to the hospital, what happens when either that piece of paper just gets tossed out to the side, or they look at it and say, yeah, we don't do that. We don't do intermittent monitoring. You have to have an IV. They don't honor the things that are in your birth plan. So it's so much more than just filling out your preferences on a piece of paper. You really need to do a little bit of work in order to make sure that you have the support that you need for what's in your birth plan.
Yes. I love that you said some hospitals say they don't do it. I mean, that's always so tricky. Now, the one thing that I have seen people say is they want to have a water birth. And I'm always like, do you know if your hospital has tubs or tubs that you're allowed to birth in? That is something that the hospital is pretty much a stickler on for infection reasons and other reasons. But do you think there are a lot of things that people put on their birth plan beyond like the structural needs? Like, because if there is no tub, there is no water birth that cannot be accommodated in the hospital?
It's not that they can't be accommodated. It's just that sometimes the culture of the hospital makes it so that they don't feel comfortable or they're not used to doing it. A good one may be like fetal monitoring. Some hospitals just don't feel comfortable at all with intermittent monitoring, and they want you to stay strapped to the monitor all the time, even if you're low risk and even if you would otherwise be a candidate for it. So I think it's not that things can't be done. It's just that the culture of a particular hospital may make it so that those aren't things that they're used to doing.
Yes,
And you want to
very.
know that beforehand so you can prepare
Yeah.
yourself accordingly. Yeah.
Yeah, because some nurses don't even know how to do intermittent monitoring.
Hmm.
Like, it's just not
Correct.
something that they've been
Correct.
trained on because we never see it,
Yep.
right? And so
Hmm.
you don't wanna come in, and that's the first time this nurse has ever even tried intermittent monitoring. Nobody wants
Exactly.
to be the
Yes.
first in healthcare.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome tip. How do you think is the best way to do you recommend people call the hospital or review it with their provider? What do you think's best?
Yeah, so I teach a whole class and I actually do it. I'm starting to do it live where there's some questions you can ask to help you get a sense for the way that your doctor approaches birth, the way that the hospital approaches birth. So some of the questions, and I'll just go through a couple of them, are, and some of them are things that people may not even think of. And like, what does this have to do with my birth plan? But for example, you can ask, what are your thoughts on doulas? And the reason I say that that's a great question is because doulas, we know that type of continuous labor support improves outcomes. It decreases the chances for C-section, increases chances for vaginal birth, decreases your chances for needing pain medication. It can shorten your labor. So if you have a doctor who's like, oh, I don't know about doulas, or I'm not comfortable with doulas, or I don't know why people need a doula, that kind of gives you a clue to the way that they approach birth. And is it going to be in line with the things that you want for your birth? Even if you don't plan to have a doula, I think that's still good information to know. On the flip side, if they're like, oh, yeah, we work with doulas in our hospital, or here are a couple of doulas that I work with that I know that come to our hospital a lot, that's going to make you feel better about knowing that, oh, okay, this is the type of things, this is the way that they approach birth and look at birth, and the hospital approaches birth. So asking questions, yes, calling up to labor and delivery is going to be another way to find out information about the hospital. You can certainly do that for sure. Go on a hospital tour, ask those questions while you're on a hospital tour is also very important.
Yeah. I love that there are some like sneaky ways that we can try and get in questions without being so like are you willing to support natural birth? Like that's kind of a hostile way, but I love the idea of like do you support doulas? That kind of a thing. So I think that's awesome. Nicole, what are some other tips that people can use as they're making their birth plan or preferences or
Mhm.
however people want to term it?
Yeah, so one thing I would say is approach it from a place of kindness. And what I mean by that is sometimes I see people come in and they're like demanding and like, here's my birth plan and you better listen and you better do it. And think about if someone comes at you that way, that doesn't necessarily foster environment of trust. And because there has to be trust between the doctor and the nurses in the hospital and the person giving birth. So start from a place of kindness and things like, these are my preferences, these are my wishes. I'm glad that you're here to help me with the birth of my baby. So start from that human connection. Even you can say, I'm scared, I'm a little bit worried. Make people see you as human. Sometimes in medicine, that kindness has been beaten out of us because of just being overworked, or we just sometimes need a reminder of why we got into it. So start from that place of connection and kindness. Now, if people don't listen or respond, then definitely take it up, but start from connecting on a human level.
Yeah, I definitely love that part too because when you come in like demanding that this is your birth plan and you
Hmm.
will absolutely follow it, it makes us like obviously we're good we're just there to help you. We want to do our best, but when you start off the
Right.
relationship in an aggressive way, it all like
It doesn't, that's not a great way to start it off. Yeah.
no, it definitely deflates me as a nurse because you're there. You're
Yeah.
really a lot there to help them. Like you're just hoping for a
Hmm.
great day. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Any other tips for birth plans?
Yes. Another thing is it has to be on one page. Please don't come in with the 15-page birth plan because nobody's going to read it. And I'm not trying to be rude or just, dismissive or, not respectful, but no, we are all busy people and no one's going to read a long birth plan. You really can get the things that are important to you in a page on a birth plan. So make it a page and it's much more likely to be respected and listened to and actually looked at and not just stuck in the chart. somewhere. And a lot of that will be if you have that discussion during your office visits about what's in the birth plan and going through it, you won't need a 15-page birth plan. It's
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's extra. Yeah.
And a lot of people are surprised that the basic birth plan is what we're all hoping for in the room. I really don't want to
Hmm.
bring PID in. I definitely don't want you to have an episiotomy. I don't want to go for a section. Like the basic
Right.
birth plan is what your nurse really wants to follow either way.
And well, I think part of that though is that actually that unfortunately is not the case for everyone, and people don't know that. I've discovered that in teaching my birth plan class, one of the questions I teach is to ask their doctor, how many of your patients having their first baby have a C-section? And just curious, not like just trying to get information. And she told me that her doctor looked at her, she said he was very nice, but he said 70% of his patients having their first baby have a C-section. And it was like, whoa, wait, what? Like, first off, I can't believe they actually responded and answered the question that way. But clearly they're doing a lot of C-sections and in an environment where the hospital isn't necessarily like stopping them from doing that. So sometimes, unfortunately, people don't know that yes, your nurse is on your side or your doctor is on your side. And that's why you need to ask ahead of time so you feel comfortable going in. That's why you bring out the birth plan in the beginning and say, hey, of course, the thing that's most important to me is that I'm healthy and my baby's healthy, but here's some things that I want for my birth. You kind of get everybody all on the same page and knowing that they support the things that you want for your birth. And if they don't, then you have people to advocate for you. You have a doula who can really help speak up for you, or your partner is there to really help advocate for the things that are important to you if you don't have other options, because not everybody has options.
That's true. So a lot of people probably can't switch because a lot of our doctors that were on the higher end of a C-section rate were Medi-Cal or whatever Medicaid type
Hmm.
service they were on. So that
Hmm.
was who they could see. So I think
Right.
that's a great idea, especially going over it in advance with them so that you knew that. I love that going in.
Yeah, yeah, because then it's like, hey, maybe I need to wait as long as I can before I go to the hospital. So I'm in really good, strong labor, and it's a lot more difficult to say like, hey, let's just go do a C-section, or maybe I need to try and find a doula, ask for a doula on my registry so that I can get some support for a doula, so I can have somebody who can help advocate for me.
Yeah, because sometimes that can be a struggle to even find a doula in your price
Mhm.
range, stuff like that. Great, great advice for the birth
Mhm.
plan.
I just want to say one more thing. Like, some people also underestimate the importance or the power of your labor nurse in your birth experience, because she's going to be the person who's with you for 95% and your doctor is going to be there for like five. So they're going to come in very brief moments. So if you can get a labor nurse or even ask for a labor nurse, hey, is there a nurse who really likes to do unmedicated birth? Is it possible that I could work with her? Or a nurse who will really be on your side if you tell her like, I really don't want an episiotomy. I mean, I've seen nurses who like discreetly kind of move the scissors off the table because they know that that particular doctor can be a little bit scissor heavy. So definitely utilize or connect with your labor nurse as a resource. So many of them are willing and want to do so.
Yes. And I was going to say that when we look at your birth plan, a lot of people think that it's bothersome to us, but a lot of what you put on your birth plan is what we have to go over in the ginormous amount of charting we have to do at the beginning.
Mhm.
We chart, are you planning to breastfeed? Are you hoping for an epidural? And so it's just like one less thing I have to ask you, which I'm not
Right.
sad about at all because there's
Right.
so many
Right.
questions in the beginning. And I 100%
Exactly.
agree, especially sometimes you don't have a lot to say over who the first nurse is that gets you.
Mhm.
But if you're looking at a shift change, always ask when the shift changes and just say, hey, I've loved you. Obviously, you don't want to turn off the labor nurse that you've had. Do you know if on the next shift there's a nurse who loves supporting natural birth or whatever like that? Is there a chance I could get assigned to her? That type of thing. That is a super pro tip about being in the hospital.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming out. Now, Nicole, you teach a birth plan class, and we're going to put that link in the show notes. She does it live. I guess, can you do it like on demand also? Is there an option to just watch it
Yeah,
whenever?
I used to do it on demand, and now I'm going back to doing it live just because I like the interaction with people, and I also do Q&A afterwards where I just answer whatever people's questions that they have about pregnancy and birth, which is really helpful for everyone in the audience. So it's just a great way to connect and have that connection and not just, watching me on the screen.
I love teaching live, and I'm sure you get like a lot of joy out of doing that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I
All
do.
right. Thanks for coming on. I hope this helped people kind of understand how to use a birth plan. Honestly, I think a lot of these are very hidden tips that people don't talk about. So I would definitely check out Nicole's birth plan class. I think that would be so helpful.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on, Nicole. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. There were so many great tips that you can only find from people who have delivered lots of babies. So I'm so grateful that Dr. Rankins came on. So many great tips. Be sure and find her free birth class. You can find it on our website, and we will have that link in the show notes. And if you are looking to really get your easiest birth, come join us in the online prenatal class for couples, where we get you prepared in just 3 hours for your upcoming birth. Stay tuned. We've got great episodes coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking about voting in some of the smaller elections around us with my friend who is on the school board. So stay tuned. Thanks for joining us on the Pulling Curls podcast today. If you liked today's episode, please consider reviewing, sharing, subscribing. It really helps our podcast grow. Thank you.